As I'm sure many of you already know, Diablo 4 has had an end-game beta going on for quite some time now. And even though I haven't gotten an invite, which I am very salty about, we are lucky enough that there are plenty of people out there that don't give a shit about NDAs. So there are quite a few videos out there of this exclusive D4 beta. And lucky enough for you, I've sat down and gone through about 10 of those videos. Okay, so let's just get right into it. One thing that I've noticed on Reddit is a lot of people are saying, oh, legendary items don't rain from the sky, items are pretty rare, blah, blah, blah. And you know, I honestly think this is coming from people in the beta that haven't really leveled past level 30, which seems to be a very common occurrence with a lot of these dimwits that got into the beta. There was one really good video of a person who got to, I think it's like tier 2 nightmare dungeons or something like that with a barbarian. And this is really the only video I've seen out there of actual end game play. All the other leaked videos are by a bunch of troglodytes that didn't even get to the end game before they started leaking their footage. So most of it is honestly not even relevant or really useful because a lot of it is footage we've seen before or things we've known about. So these people that leaked all their gameplay of them being level 20 or 30 is pretty much irrelevant. But this one video of like a level 53 barbarian, I think it was, doing end-game content actually revealed quite a bit to us. This character was wearing mostly legendaries and had 2 unique items equipped. Which is interesting because I was under the impression that you would only be able to equip 1 unique item. Also, when he was running this dungeon, he found like 4 or 5 legendaries, maybe even 6 legendaries throughout the entire run. So it would appear that legendaries are still somewhat raining from the sky. Now, is that a big deal really? I would say it's not, because I think a lot of your character power comes from unique items. The barbarian was using a unique item that made his whirlwind do some sort of fiery explosion every once in a while, or when he killed an enemy or something like that, and the damage was out of this world. So he'd be running around fighting something and not doing that much damage, something would explode and he'd crit for like 500,000 damage and it would kill everything on the screen. Now this leads me to believe that your build and the power of your build is going to be heavily reliant on whatever uniques you decide to use. Now it could also be that the tuning is out of whack because it is a beta and there's a lot of the game that seems pretty incomplete still, but I think it's a pretty decent indication of what we might be able to expect on release. Another thing that I noticed was that he seemed to invest quite a bit into damage over time into his build, but the actual amount of damage over time he was dealing was very, very small. And I kind of noticed this across a few different videos. There was another Druid rabies video, and I think the Druid was around level 20 something, so this is not end game content by any means, but he was doing a rabies build, which is generally a damage over time skill. And the damage over time was honestly minuscule. And same with a level 20 something rogue video that I watched, was doing some damage over time, and it just didn't seem to really do much at all. Now this could be because they didn't have the right items to invest into damage over time, so I'm sure that there will be some decent damage over time builds, or at least I hope there will be. But honestly, at first glance, with that one bar build doing the Nightmare Dungeon, he didn't seem to be doing that much damage over time at all, and he had quite a bit of investment into damage over time. Another thing that I want to talk about is player choice with things like your Paragon boards and your talent tree or skill tree. A lot of people say that the Paragon boards are really, really in-depth and they give you a lot of choice. I haven't seen any videos where the players were showing off their Paragon boards, so I have no idea how much choice is there, because like I said, all these dimwits that released their videos to us only got to like level 20 before probably getting kicked out of the beta because they broke their NDA, so there really isn't much to go off here. With the skill trees, there are a couple videos of a barbarian player and a necromancer player just sitting there and going through and showing you the skill trees and all the passives in those skill trees. So one thing that I found really interesting with the skill trees is that they really don't give you that much choice. So when you get to a little passive crossroad, which I believe this has been revealed somewhat to a certain extent in an IGN interview video, so I'll try to throw up a clip of what that kind of looks like right now. But when you get to like a crossroads for like a section of skills, you have like 3 or 4 skills to pick from, and then each one of those skills has typically three passives associated with those skills. And you're forced into picking one of the passives, and then you can only choose one of the other two passives. So really, there's not much choice there. So it's like, so if you look at a game like Last Epoch, for instance, Last Epoch has a skill, and then they have an entire tree dedicated to that skill. So you have to actually think, okay, do I want this with this skill? Do I want to build into this? And you have to sacrifice something somewhere on the tree to build into what you want out of that skill. But in Diablo 4, what are you missing out on really? You're missing out on one passive. You're not missing out on a lot there. You make the choice between one of two things, and it's like, okay, big fucking deal. However, there are some passives that aren't associated to skills at all that you can invest into that are more generic and affect your overall character more, or all of your skills more, as aside from just affecting one skill in particular. So depending on how this plays out late game, you might have to make the decision of, do I want to invest into these more generic passives, or do I want to invest into my skill heavier, which in reality, you don't really have to invest much into your skill, because like I said, you have two options essentially with the passives there. And I really do think that late game, if you're going for a certain build, so if you're playing a Necromancer and you're going for, I don't know, like a Bone Spear build or something, why wouldn't you invest into the Bone Spear skill all the way, right? Like you'd get the 5 skill points and then get into the 2 passive points. Like, of course you're going to do that if you're going for a Bone Spear build. So in reality, there's not much choice there. I think that's kind of sad. I do, however, think that it's like a good start. So if over the next couple years or so, they decide to add more passives, add more skills, which, you know, we have no idea if that's going to be the case, but if they do, then this is a good foundation. Another thing I noticed with the skill trees is that the playstyles and the choices you'd be making are very obvious. And what do I mean by this? Well, the Necromancer skill tree, let's look at that for instance. Well, I can't actually show it to you, but let's talk about that. The Bone Necromancer choices, or the generic passives, seem to heavily lean towards crit and spending essence, which means that's going to dictate pretty much how you build your character. And I don't really like this that much because of the lack of choice. So if they gave us like 6 or 7 other choices, and they were like, okay, do you want to have a crit Necromancer? Do you want to have an essence spending Necromancer? Do you want a Bone Necromancer that slows or does damage over time? Like you had all these other choices with the Bone Necromancer playstyle, then I wouldn't mind this that much. But because your choices are very limited here in the skill tree to, oh, you really can only pick crit and or essence spent into bone skills, that's really the only playstyle you can get out of the bone skills, at least from what I could tell by looking at the skill tree. And this means that when you go to build your character, if you're playing a Bone Necromancer, that the skill choices or the item choices you make are very obvious. I want to get items that increase my crit chance, and I want to get items that give me more essence, and, you know, like, or help me spend more essence and reduce my cooldown on my skills. It's like, I sort of feel like they're doing that same thing that they did in Diablo 3 with sets, where they're sort of telling you how to play the game and how you should build your character. So I'm a little on the fence about all of this. I'm not really on the fence. I think it's kind of shit, to be completely honest. But it could be one of those things that, like I said before, we don't know much about the Paragon systems because I haven't seen much about that. So it could be the Paragons play a larger role, but in my opinion, I feel like you're just going to end up using the Paragon board to just further invest into these types of things like crit or more essence, essentially, because your skill tree is where it all starts. And lastly, another thing that I thought would be worth talking about is that the bottom of each skill tree appears to be a set of passives where you're only allowed to pick one, and they seem to be pretty strong. It's very similar to World of Warcraft talent trees, where, you know, you travel down the whole tree, and at the bottom you have a choice between like 2 or 3 talents that are like the really strong ones, and you got to pick one. It's basically like that. But these, at least in the Necromancer tree, are all passives. And I think this is kind of cool. I mean, the Necromancer tree only had 4 options, and I think I saw like the Barbarian one had only 4 options as well. So it's like, I mean, it's cool, but only 4 options seems like a very small amount. So like I said before, a decent foundation. Hopefully they add more into the future. And if you guys have watched this far, I'm sorry I haven't made a video in quite a while. I've been really busy lately. I've been working on some other projects that hopefully I can tell you guys about at some point in the future if you guys care to hear about it. And honestly, I just haven't had much to talk about with Diablo 4. I mean, to be completely honest, I've been very salty that I didn't get into the D4 beta. But aside from that, there hasn't been much to talk about. Yeah, there's been the IGN video. videos, and I've seen lots of other content creators talking about this stuff, but to be completely honest, it's all been talked about. It's all the same shit. It's just regurgitated stuff that we've known about, and so in reality, there isn't much to say. So I figured now, after there's been like, 16 videos released of people that broke NDA, that's actually worth talking about a little bit, and I figured you guys might want to know some of this information. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully in the future I can release some more videos about Diablo 4 if they give us an open beta soon. But until then, I'll see you guys later.